hosting this conference and for this warm welcome here in the Institute for Advanced Studies in Elementary Culture and Civilization. As Livius pointed out, we are an absolutely international community here, and actually the whole workshop is on the crossroad of various activities. On the one hand, here from colleagues in Bucharest, on the other hand, as it was obvious, let's say, on the first slide, also in terms of organization. This is, let's say, something that I would like to frame for the upcoming conference. So this is at the same time the 24th Melammu Workshop, and Sebastian will be able to talk about the Melammu Workshops much more and much better than me, but this is an ongoing, let's say, series of conferences focused on the Iranian world and, let's say, the Mesopotamian and other outskirts and contacts with the neighbors. On the other hand, this is also part of the upcoming cluster of Eurasia and Eurasian transformations, which just started approximately a year ago and is hosted by the Austrian Academy of Science. And this is what I'm going to talk to you about in the next 2 or 3 minutes, because this also is very much in the frame of what we are going to do here. So, the focus of the cluster is on Asia and East Central Europe, and basically the topic is the interactivity between the various nomadic people of the steppe with the empires surrounding it, and the empires in the long durée. So we have a huge geographical and a huge chronological frame. It starts in Antiquity, in, let's say, the 2nd, even 3rd millennium BCE, and actually the topic comes up until our modern and recent times. So one of the big topics is the interaction between, let's say, the Byzantine or the Ottoman Empire, or the Iranian empires, or Chinese empires, with the various peoples along the borderlands. And of course, here we are stepping in already in the very topic of this conference. So the focus is on the steppe and its people and the interconnection with its neighbors. And the whole cluster, unfortunately, it's an Austrian cluster, it's not a German cluster. If it would be a German cluster, we would have probably 10 times as much budget as we do have in Austria. But it's a joint activity of various institutions in Austria. So it's the Academy of Science, it's the University of Vienna, the University of Innsbruck, and the Central European University, which since a couple of years also is located in Vienna. And of course, this is just the core network which cooperates with various partners all around the world, and with what we call the target countries, which are the countries along the huge steppe from, let's say, the Hungarian plain to Mongolia. We have a board of directors, 7 outstanding scholars in very different areas of research, and we have, this is not of interest, we have 31, let's say, key researchers, and I have the honor to be one of them. And the specialities of these key researchers is stretching from ancient Near East studies to ancient history, Byzantine studies, medieval studies, but coming to the early modern time, the modern time, and contemporary history. And of course, we just experienced, let's say, a phase of, well, dramatic events in the former Soviet countries in exactly this region. So this is all within the frame of the big cluster. And one focus of the cluster is on the written culture, let's say, the manuscript heritage. when we were trying to get the application for the cluster together, we thought it would be a good idea, it's necessary to have not only the textual sources but also the material sources, archaeology. But then we found out we would need another 30 researchers to cover this, so we focused on the textual evidence, which is extensive and in large parts not really known and published until now. There are huge manuscript archives from Samarkand to China and still in many European museums and libraries, which have not been studied properly, and this is one of the focus of the whole class thing. So, okay, our goals are to engage with the various natures of Eurasia, and the cluster itself is not so much about doing research itself. This has to be done in additional projects, but it's more about networking, so building the bridges, doing the contacts, and this is exactly what we are doing here. So in this aspect, this conference fits very well into the framework of the cluster, and also it is our aim to get in contact with scholars and colleagues in those countries which have not been yet very well connected with the Western research, like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Nepal, and so on. So this is really what we want to achieve, and the whole thing should have not just a perspective of the 5 years for which we got funding. There's the possibility to get another 5 years of funding if we are successful, and we need this additional 5 years, especially for training new generations, not for establishing the contact between, let's say, the established scholars, but it has an explicit training aspect, because what is involved here and what is one of the strengths of colleagues in the cluster is the philological competence in many of those languages, in ancient languages, competences which are not very widespread anymore. This is what we want to achieve. We want to get a new generation on board to, let's say, incorporate them into the activities of the cluster. So these are the various approaches, and the borderlands. Well, this is the organizational structure, which probably is not of high interest for you, but on the top line you will see we have 5 key themes that we want to approach. And one is, let's say, the dynamics of empires, territorial empires opposed to nomadic empires. And another one is mobility and migration. Those two topics actually are in the center of our activities in the next 2 days. So this is what we are looking for. This is what is, let's say, the topic of this conference: crossing geographical barriers and conceptualizing expansion in Eurasia. And this is a highly interesting and actually very new topic. We all have in our minds that the big rivers, the sea, the big mountains, on the way they are dividing, let's say, the economic but also the political map. But the challenge is to overcome these barriers, and of course, especially expanding empires, but also expanding economies. They had to find their way through the sea, over the mountains, to cross the borders, and what happens then. So the topic of the conference really covers this highly interesting research question in a full panorama of approaches, from, let's say, the mental mapping to actual, let's say, political movements and political activities of the empires and of various pressure groups along the empires. Maybe you will ask yourself, And what is Bernhard Palme, who is a papyrologist working about Egypt, doing with us, working on the steppe? This was also a good question for the cluster. It happens that in Egypt, and only in Egypt, we do have lots of documentary evidence, 1 million of papyri, coming from the Roman Empire, the Sasanian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and of course the Arab Empire. And those are major players in the interaction with the nomadic people in the steppe. And from the papyri, we really understand better than from any other sources how those empires internally worked, how was the organization, the system, the administration. And this is how I got connected to the steppe, which otherwise is far away from my horizon. On the other hand, borderland is also a topic which is within my own research interest. It's just a borderline land to another direction, because Egypt, in a more global perspective, might be addressed as something like the link between Eurasia and Africa. And actually the southernmost parts of Egypt, they have always been an area of interaction with all the countries further south, like Sudan, the Empire of Kush, Meroe, and so on. So this is really the gateway of the Mediterranean, of the Levant, and the Eurasian empires into Africa. And this is one of the exciting things that I'm trying to do in my spare time. So thank you very much, and I think we have in front of us 2 very exciting days with lots of interesting topics, and thank you also for pre-circulating the abstracts of the upcoming conference. This really made it possible for us all to get an impression what we are going to discuss here today and tomorrow. So thank you very much for organizing all this, and thank you very much for hosting all these wonderful activities, and I give the microphone back to you.